Hello and welcome to Not Complain Enough. This is episode number 6, and I'm your podcast host, Carista. And today I would like to delve into one of those really taboo topics. I want to delve into sort of workplace trauma, really. And I've been doing a lot of reading about trauma, and I think that there's a lot that has been researched, in particular to domestic abuse, coercive control, all of these sorts of things. There's some fantastic books out there. Jess Hill has written an incredible book called See What You Made Me Do, and it explores the systems of abuse, both within not only the court systems, but within Australia, but how, domestic abuse perpetuates certain behaviours, and really looking into coercive control and how coercive control is one of those things that's really, really hard to identify. It happens slowly and over time. And it fascinates me because I find, and what I have found, I guess, previously in some of the experiences that I've had in different workplaces, is that some of them are actually an abusive relationship of their own. There's the elements of coercive control, there's the elements of this sort of, you need to be doing this, doing what I say. There's no coming back. Your needs don't matter. What you think doesn't matter. And there's those cycles. And it's interesting because so many people go from job to job to job. And, when it starts out, it's all really nice and lovely. It's kind of like a new relationship, it's all fabulous and we're all loving on each other and everything's great. And then slowly over time, there's one disappointment after another, or there's one one sort of comment or criticism, and the critical comments keep coming, and sometimes they're overt and sometimes they're covert, and other times you also have people that are actively in front of your face, being so pleasant and so lovely, and you couldn't possibly think that they would say anything terrible about you. Yet through the grapevine, or slowly after time, you realize that there's certain people around you that don't value your opinions in the same way, because your reputation or the thoughts that you've had or the ideas that you come up with are slowly diminished, and not through your own advocacy or anything like that, but through other people undermining you without your knowledge. What I like to call, the smiling assassin. So they're really lovely to your face and then literally stabbing you in the back, while smiling at your face. And these people go around and actively do this. And this happens often, so often. And it's like an abusive relationship within a workplace. There is so much to unpack when it comes to trauma. And of course, we all experience our own types of traumatic events throughout our lifetimes. And it's interesting to understand that, like, trauma is not just the big traumas, or like the big T traumas, as like some people like to refer to them as. Sometimes they're the little T traumas. Sometimes it can be looking at something as simple as, for example, there's a house fire. A firefighter will turn up and has the knowledge and the expertise and has had those experiences to understand what to do. A 4-year-old, on the other hand, their world is literally burning down and they might not have the emotional agility, or, I mean, at that age, you don't have the encyclopedia of wisdom of experiences to be able to process something like that. So it can be really traumatic. And that can happen in little moments as well. It can happen in your needs being invalidated. It can happen in you being criticized over and over and over again. There's some fantastic studies that have been done with the likes of water and, and plants. Like, you have two different plants, and one of them you're giving love in comments and telling it how amazing it is and all of those things. And the other one, you're telling that it's a piece of shit and it's awful and all the cruel criticisms that you can think of. And, the energetics around just those words and how that environment, so giving it love and compliments or criticizing and undermining its potential, makes a huge difference. It makes an incredibly big difference in the everyday, and people are no different. If you're walking into an environment where you are being criticized constantly, there's, it doesn't matter what you do, nothing's good enough. How are you ever going to feel like you are contributing meaningfully to an environment that is literally treating you like a piece of shit? You're not. And on the other hand, if you're in an environment that is supportive, and I think the contrast is so vast that I know of people that have come out of really traumatic workplace experiences, being overly criticized, undermined. There's just been no compassion for life in general. And they've gone into a different workplace, and it's either happened again. So they've ended up in another traumatic workplace experience, kind of like going into abusive relationship after abusive relationship, or they've gone from a really awful workplace and actually gone into a very supportive workplace. And for them, it's actually been quite disconcerting because they're not used to it. They're actually used to the abuse. And this is the thing that I find so profound in looking at trauma, within a workplace context. And it's like, well, you're actually perpetuating the mental health issues and the traumatic experiences that people are experiencing because you as a workplace are not actually owning your part in this. So much of these mental health well-being things and all the rest of it are actually putting the onus back on the person to be sorting their own shit out, right? So it's like, oh, you've got some issues, you need to go to therapy, or you need to go use the employee assistance program, the EAP. Those are the things that we have in Australia. I'm sure that there's the same types of workplace programs in all different parts of the world. And while for the facade of them, they look good, they're ticking a box and being like, yeah, we care about our employees, we give them these services. What they're quietly saying is, we're not going to take responsibility for how we're treating you in the workplace and how, these coercive control or these underminings or these criticisms or this basic cruelty that happens by overworking, underpaying, expecting you to work weekends, the creep of your weekend not being respected. We're going to not respect your boundaries. But at the end of the day, if you've got mental health issues, well, that's on you. Like, you must be the problem, because we're not going to take responsibility for the environment that we're creating, which is actually causing, I would argue, causing, for the most part, a lot of these issues. And if it's not causing them, it's definitely enhancing some of the underlying, maybe complex trauma. So complex post-traumatic stress, or PTSD in general. It's highlighting that, and it's actually bringing that to the surface. And the thing is, when we have these environments that are not supportive, they are actively soul destroying, really. Like, you're selling your soul to be in a soul destroying environment for what purpose? It's actually, like, for the most part, and I read this study, I can't remember where where I read it. So apologies, I can't cite it, but I'm sure you can Google it somewhere. And it was around the fact that like people that are in these workplaces, like if you're in this regular job, you're actually financially generally not so well off, not because you're not getting paid well, although that is the case in a lot of instances, but it's actually because what's happening is you are using shopping or getting the next best thing, whatever that looks like, and you're using that to kind of self-soothe your emotions out of being in these awful workplace environments. And hands up, I can tell you I did that 100%. My shoe collection is fucking amazing. And yeah, I had a beautiful place that I used to go to in Canberra when I lived there. And I'd have a shit day at work or whatever. I'd either go in there after work or I'd duck in there in my lunch break and buy things to make me feel better. I think we've all done it to a most part. We're self-soothing through these other ways instead of actually looking at the underlying cause of how these environments are actually contributing to the diminished mental health state and our emotional well-being. And, you know, I came across a tweet that was sort of like saying essentially that, you know, they want you to bring your whole self to work, yet they don't accept your emotional roller coasters, right? So how can you actually acknowledge and accept people to bring their full selves to work when you only want them to be in this bullshit toxic positivity? So unless it's a positive thing, everyone else is negative. And I've seen that play out in workplaces as well, where, people are providing critical thinking. They're providing the they're providing insights into a project or whatever it is that's going on. And the higher up people or whoever you want to attribute it to, really, it kind of says, oh, well, if you don't agree with that, then that's pretty negative and you're just must be a negative person. And sort of blame shifting, like instead of actually taking a step back and looking at it and going, you know what, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. So let's see how we can work that into what we're trying to achieve here. Or, just acknowledging other people's perspectives. And that really doesn't happen in workplaces. It's this not only hierarchy, which we see so much of, but it becomes this totalitarian type of management approach. And people don't like to have their authority questioned or their power questioned. We've really lost the art of critical thinking. And I think for the most part, that has actually, it's only going to diminish the types of workplaces, the types of industries that we can develop, the types of projects and creativity that we can actually ensue. Because what happens is when we don't have critical think, we have groupthink, and groupthink just becomes a homogenous same of fucking everything. There's an incredible book by Adam Ferrier called The Customer's Not Always Right. I think that's what it's called anyway. And in that, he actually outlines, it's all about branding and marketing. He's has an incredible agency called Tinkerbell. And they do lots of guerrilla marketing and branding and different things. And he's been in the industry for a very long period of time, and is also in a prior life, I guess, was a psychologist, I think a criminal, yeah, he worked in the criminal justice systems or something around that. And in his book, he talks about how like going and buying a car, for instance, becomes this homogenous experience. So he was looking at, the different types of cars that you can go get. So, and you go from one dealership to the other, or you go from one car manufacturer to the other. So say you want a Mazda versus a Honda versus a Mercedes versus a BMW, whatever it is. And you're looking at, say you want to upgrade to a family car. So you want to get like a little SUV or something like that. And when you're going to each of the different dealerships, they've become so homogenous that no one actually is really any different from the other. Like at the end of the day, there's not much that you're really buying into. And I think that that's where we've come with not only workplaces, everyone seems to be carbon copying the same bullshit that they're offering. And, you know, even in well-being, like the answer for so many of these workplaces is either, oh, that's all a bit too hard. We can't talk about that. So you need to go talk to a psychologist, which of course, like people do need to do that, but also acknowledge that not everyone has the means to be able to go do that. Not everyone has the space and time to do some of these things because they're so overworked in the environment that you've created for them that it's this perpetual cycle that they actually can't get out of. And so this is what I mean. Like a lot of these places aren't taking ownership. In terms of workplace well-being, and in terms of homogenous offerings, you know, so many of them are offering the EAP, but they're also offering like apps, like applications. You know, you've got to put in your health and well-being things and do these checks and or do surveys or whatever. Like that is the most bullshit thing ever. If you're in a really bad place, the last thing you want to do is be pouring your heart out onto some fucking application that, you know, HR are just going to use as statistics against the employees, or, you know, use them for the general report or whatever and be like, this app helped so many people and blah, blah, blah. But they don't really check in. They don't really check in and make sure that people are actually doing okay. And I think that's the difference. We have become such this fast-paced environment of doing, and everything needs to be done immediately. And we all need to be showing our value and doing that through, you know, how many hours we put in and how hard we work. But at the end of the day, like if you don't have a sense of well-being, if you don't have a sense of fulfillment in what you're doing each and every day, then it's only going to be detrimental to your own mental well-being and to your own health. And it's a very either a very quick or a very slow death by a thousand cuts process of, you know, your health and mental well-being not being so great because of the environments that you're in. So yeah, I think, you know, we have these homogenous offerings that aren't any different, and there needs to be some difference that's happening. And I look forward to seeing what a future workplace looks like where people are actually honored, valued, and cared for as a whole person, not just turning up as the positive Penny or, you know, the positive Polly or whatever. Into a workplace situation and not actually acknowledging that some of the shit's really hard. And, you know, we need to have a balance of that. Like it's not all or nothing. And people aren't robots. They're not computers. Computers are there for a reason. People have emotions. They have things that they need to work through. And, you know, they need space held for them as well. And if you can create an environment where you are providing a place where people feel safe, connected, feel like they're part of a community and not just another number, then I can guarantee that your productivity levels don't need to be as micromanaged as what you think they do. People will feel valued enough to go above and beyond. And I think there's, you know, there's countless studies out there of workplace, you know, work like employees and what they value. And for the most part, you know, it's not more money. It's actually having respect and feeling valued and respected. And there's a lot to say about that. So I hope this has provided some insights. This is just was a bit of a brain dump I had this morning, um, and I just really felt the need to share. I'm very passionate about well-being in workplace environments and actually giving a shit about people's mental well-being, because if we're not, we're just creating traumatic environments, and those traumas are perpetuated over and over again. And until we recognize that workplaces are as traumatic as being in a domestic abuse or an abusive relationship, instead of just looking at abuse, like domestic abuse and coercive control, just being in a home environment, it's actually happening every day in your everyday work environment. So I would implore you to, look into how coercive control plays out and what that looks like. And just really honor yourself and take stock of where you're at, the environments that you're in, and how they matter. I hope you've enjoyed. Please like, follow, subscribe. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and would love to hear your perspectives on any of this today. I hope you have a great week. Thanks for listening.